This episode is brought to you by North Texas Honda Dealers. North Texas Honda Dealers, they're here to help.
He has time, launches it to the end zone. Touchdown! Terrence Williams!
The throw goes to the right side for Crabtree. It's caught. He he's going touchdown, Red Raiders!
Watson up the 10. Watson up the right sideline.
He's got to go. He's tackled. Sam Houston wins it. The Bearcats capture their first FCS championship.
Welcome to the Republic of Football. I am your host for the day, Mike Craven. And like his Texas State Bobcats, Ishmael Johnson has no-showed this week. I am joined, however, by our talented producer, Mallory Hartley. Mal, pal, how are you doing? How are you recovering from your long weekend in San Antonio?
I'm good. Oh, I'm really close. I need to scoot that camera back. But you just got a snort out of me, like, from that joke. And the funny thing is you've told it to me, like, 3 times already. But, like, once you said it confidently on the air, it, like, made me chuckle a little bit. Like,
I was pretty proud of that. I was pretty proud of that.
It was
I was
really
pretty
good.
proud of that. Ish isn't here to defend himself. He's
No.
doing top secret Texas football work, and we'll leave it at that. But he is not here. He will join us for our Sunday recap special when we get to that. But today, we're going to focus on a couple headlines. The college football playoffs expanded and some injuries at the quarterback position around the state. We will be joined by good friend and excellent writer, Sam Kahn of The Athletic, senior writer there at The Athletic, formerly of ESPN, worked at the Houston Chronicle for a while, knows a lot about football inside the state, so we'll talk to Sam Kahn about that. And then we will go through every other game that we don't talk to Sam about. With Sam, we'll probably talk Texas-Alabama, Texas Tech-Houston, even BYU-Baylor. And then Mallory and I, after that interview, will go through all the other games in the state. All 12 teams in the state at the FBS level are in action for Week 2.
Yep.
So before we get to that, let's start with some headlines. The biggest news happened, I believe, Friday as we were driving
we were
from Dallas to San Antonio to watch Judson Westlake.
Yeah, we were literally in the car, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm like, oh, crap, they did it. They actually did it. They actually approved a 12-team college football expansion. That's freaking crazy.
It's such a journalist's nightmare to be in the car, and we
Yeah.
were like dead in the middle of our drive,
yeah.
too. Like, we weren't close to one or the other. For the biggest college football news to drop since the last biggest college football news dropped, because
Right.
it seems like every 2 weeks there's this like new bombshell that changes the sport completely.
Right.
But to be kind of in the middle of nowhere, because we're on like the 130 toll road, not to be able to write about it was pretty tough. But
I almost was like, do you like want to just pull off to the side of the road real quick? Like,
I did.
I could like we could do that if you need to do that. Like, this is your job. I understand. I can drive if you want. But
it was
yeah,
tough.
No, it was tough.
But for those who haven't heard or need a refresher, the college football playoff is to expand to 12 teams by 2026. That 12 teams will be consisted of the 6 highest ranked conference champions and the 6 highest ranked at-large bids, right, that are determined by the committee.
Yeah.
So 12 teams total. 4 teams will get a bye. The other 8 teams will play. It sounds like those first-round games will be on campus. So, like, whoever the 5 seed team is, so let's say it's A&M is playing 12 seed LSU.
So
A&M would have
essentially
the
get
home
field
game.
advantage. Okay.
And then once we got to the semifinals, that it would be more of a bowl game kind of site that we're used to now with the college football player. I guess the quarterfinals, I'm sorry. So,
Right.
But I think the biggest news out of this deal isn't just the expanded playoff, which is good because it brings more fan bases involved instead of just having 5, 6, 7 fan bases involved in November, December. Now we're going to have 14, 15, 16, 17 fan bases involved
Right.
As this thing narrows down. But for me, as a G5 grad, as somebody who loves G5 football, one G5 conference champion should. I say should because who knows what changes over the next 3 or 4 years in terms of what conferences look like and all that kind of stuff. But on paper, 6 conference champions guaranteed a spot means that 5 Power 5 champions will get in. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, Pac-12. But that leaves a spot guaranteed for like the American champion or the Sun Belt champion or probably not, though, the Conference USA
Mountain
champion,
West, yeah.
Mountain West, right? So whoever that kind of darling team would be from the G5
Yeah.
ranks gets in there. I think that's big news for places like UTSA, North Texas, SMU.
Right.
That now you're not shut out from the playoff. There is a route there.
Right. Well, and Pickle and I talked about this a lot on WTF last week, and this was before the expansion actually dropped. The news did on Thursday. We were like, if they were to expand it to at least 12 teams, you have to set some kind of precedent because nobody – I mean, I guess a lot of people aren't going to watch it if there's going to be 6 SEC teams and 6 Big Ten teams. You had to set that precedent to where, yeah, you get each Power 5 conference champion in there, and then, of course, you get your low-level G5 conference champion in there too. But I was like, yeah, you got to at least put that out there because realistically, like, man, no one wants to watch a 6 SEC, 6 Big Ten team.
Right. I think the way it will be, I think it'll still be about half of the teams. I think there'll be like 3 SEC teams,
right?
3 Big Ten teams, conference champions from everywhere else, and then maybe an extra Big 12 team or ACC team or Pac-12 or even a second G5 team,
right,
depending on how things break. So, but for me, it keeps the fan base engaged throughout the season. You know, you lose one game early, you don't have to go, oh, well, our season's over. Like Notre Dame, for example. They lose to Ohio State week 1. In the current format, it's kind of done.
Right.
You're probably out of it, right? Even if you run the table,
That's a good point.
probably out of it. With the 12-team thing, if you're Notre Dame, you lose that first game, you're still in it. You know,
right.
You run the table, you can still get into that 12-team range. And then lastly, I think another big positive will be Texas and Alabama are playing this week. That will future be a conference game. But in general, I think we get to see more of these games.
Yes.
Right? You're not going to be scared to
schedule a hard team
right.
first.
Because if you lose, it's not the end of the world. You can go win your conference and you're in a spot, right? If you're Texas Tech,
yeah,
you can go schedule Texas once Texas is in the SEC. And even if you lose that game, if you go win the Big 12, you're going to be one of the 6 highest-ranked conference champions. So
exactly.
I think it's good for college football. I'm a big people who listen to this podcast know Ish and I aren't big college football playoff or bust people because it eliminates so many good things about the college game.
Right.
But expanding it to 12, I think, is a good, solid number. I hope it doesn't get bigger than that.
Right.
And I think we do have to figure out a way to save the bowl structure. But it's a step in the right direction. We knew this was coming. At least there's the 6 conference champions guaranteed a spot. I think that was a really important part.
Right. I was just on my computer when you were saying this, but I don't know if you actually said it. But now that we got the facts out of the way, let's kind of pull our opinions in here. It's not going to change anything, right? This is not basketball. This is not a, hey, look, St. Peter's, 15 seed, upset number 2 Kentucky. You know, like.
Right. Football's different.
Right.
It's an 85 scholarship game. You got 11 starters on both sides of the ball. You're going to play about 50, 60 guys every single game. There's 200 snaps. You know, Cincinnati made it in last year as a quote-unquote Cinderella G5 team and got housed by Alabama, right?
Yeah, right.
But so do most teams that play Alabama
exactly.
in the semifinals. You know, like Georgia housed Michigan, and Michigan's a Big Ten champion. So there's always going to be blowouts. There's always only 2 or 3 teams that really have a shot by the end of the year to win the championship. UTSA goes undefeated, sneaks into this thing. You know, they're not going to beat Georgia. They're not going to beat Alabama. And if they do, they're not going to pull that same upset again next week and the week after that. So I don't know if it changes who is in the championship game or changes who's in the semifinals, but it does change how your fan base views the college football season.
Right.
And it does change maybe the way recruits view the college football season. Because you no longer just have to go to Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson to play for a championship. You could go to Tech. You could go to TCU. You could go to Notre Dame. You can go to all these different places and find your way into the college football playoff. So maybe that kind of spreads the talent out.
Yeah.
And as the talent is spread out, it's not so much of a obstacle to beat in Alabama. You're closer to them, and it's not as big of an upset. So
right, for sure.
All around good news there. I think that's an overwhelmingly positive thing for the game. Something that's not all that positive for the game of football here inside the state. There's a lot of injuries in week 1, specifically at the quarterback position. Texas Tech lost their quarterback, Tyler Shuck, to an injury. We're not sure yet if it's AC joint, if it's a collarbone. They're saying at least 2 weeks, so he's going to miss Houston versus NC State. TCU also lost their starting quarterback. Chandler Morris beat out longtime experienced starter Max Duggan, only to be injured with a sprained knee. He's going to be out at least this week against Tarleton. And then Wiley Green at Rice was injured against USC, may or may not be there for the Week 2 game for the Owls. Which one do you think is the most important injury in terms of like will make the biggest impact if that guy doesn't get back pretty soon?
Right. I was just about to ask you that same question, but I think it's got to be Rice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Wiley Green looked okay as he could have against that USC team. Still, Rice obviously going into that game probably didn't have a chance of even scoring within that close range with USC. But I think that TJ McMahon just like it's just hard.
Yeah.
Like I think that's just such a big drop off. I think TCU is obviously in the best position just because they've got that experience coming back at quarterback with Max Duggan in place of Chandler Morris. But yeah, I think Rice is probably getting the short end of the stick here with, and they just rotate quarterbacks so much. There's just not that much consistency. So they're already struggling so much at that position anyways. And to take off your starting quarterback, they're probably going to be hurting for quite a bit if Wiley Green can't get healthy.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Donovan Smith is a capable quarterback at Texas Tech. They were in a quarterback battle all spring, all summer, all fall. So he's good. He played well in relief duty against Murray State. As we talked about, Max Duggan started dozens of games. He's played a lot, so he'll be fine there. The drop-off between Wiley Green and TJ McMahon is a big deal. It could be the difference between reaching a bowl game and not reaching a bowl game,
Right.
And so TJ McMahon threw 3 interceptions in his relief duty last week. USC returned 3 Rice interceptions for touchdowns. They got 21 points off of turnovers. Rice is not good enough to make those kind of mistakes. From talking to people around Rice, TJ McMahon has more upside.
Right.
But he makes these mistakes. And if you're Rice, your margin of error is so small, you'd rather take the game manager and see where it falls than take the risk on the upside, but you're going to throw a couple more interceptions.
Right. Well, wide receiver Luke McCaffrey did play a couple snaps last year, right?
Yeah, he played some quarterback last year.
If this continues to go the way that it does with TJ McMahon at quarterback, do you consider bringing McCaffrey back at quarterback?
That's a great question. I think McCaffrey's liking the wide receiver thing and thinks that's where his long-term position is going to be. That's where his dad played a decade in the NFL. But, yeah, if you're Mike Bloomgren and this gets to week 3, week 4, and Wiley Green's not back and you're struggling at quarterback, I think you look into any and all situation. Because if you're Bloomgren, you're coaching for your job this year. This isn't year 1 where you still have some years to figure it out and all this is unfortunate. For all intents and purposes, this could be it,
Right.
And so you got to do anything and everything you can to get him back on the field. From what I've heard, they don't think it's going to be a long-term injury.
Yeah.
But you just never know with that kind of stuff.
Right.
So hopefully he's back. They play McNeese this week. They should be able to beat him even without a quarterback. And so, hopefully they get him back going into the teeth of the schedule.
Yeah, last question before we move on. Out of those 3 quarterbacks, which one do you think is less likely to return?
Tyler Shuck.
Tyler Shuck.
It sounds like Chandler Morris, if this was a big game, could possibly give it a go.
Yeah.
They play Tarleton, so why risk it there?
Right.
Wiley Green, kind of the same thing. It sounds like, they're talking about if he's going to be back this week or next week, not if he's going to be back ever. With Tyler Shuck, if that ends up being a broken collarbone, he's out for the year. That's what he missed the rest of the out.
Yeah.
He missed 8 games last year. He only played the first 4 last year before breaking a collarbone. So
Right.
I think that injury has the biggest potential to linger. It's in his throwing shoulder, I believe. So even if it's not a broken collarbone, it becomes about pain management. You're going to get hit again.
Right.
And so I think it's one that can flare up again.
Yeah.
So, as we get Sam Kahn on the phone, let me read from the sponsors. Every high school athlete wants to play on the big stage. Every parent wants their child to be the best. But is making your target list of schools based on top 25 rankings really the best strategy? What about academics, location, coaching style, financial aid? There are so many factors that should be considered when selecting a college program outside of on-field performance. Our friends at Athletes to Athletes have put together a recruiting guide centered around providing a broader, more holistic perspective about what your college experience could be. Complete with checklists, do's and don'ts, key strategies, and much more, this 22-page guide covers everything you and your family should know as you walk through your college recruiting journey. For a limited time, Athletes to Athletes is offering this guide for free to our audience. Just go to athletetoathletes.com/Dave Campbell today to download the free college recruiting guide. That's athletes2athletes.com/Dave Campbell. We are joined on our hotline by Sam Kahn of The Athletic. I grew up in Houston. Sam Kahn will understand this reference. Everybody says Devin the Dude is every rapper's favorite rapper. Sam Kahn is every sports writer's favorite sports writer. Sam, welcome to the show.
I appreciate that. You were far too kind, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about the three big games of the weekend. UTSA is going to be mad at me for not including them in that one, but we'll stick with the Power 5 kind of big games here. Let's start with the big game of the week that everybody's talking about. Houston at Texas Tech, which is Saturday at 3 p.m. on FS1. The Red Raiders are favored by 3 points. I hear you're going to be out there in West Texas. Kind of what are some of the storylines that you're looking for in this matchup this early in the season? Should be a pretty good one.
Yes, no doubt should be. Obviously, the quarterback situation with Tech, going to be interesting to see Donovan Smith back at the controls there. And we got to see some of that last year, of course. I thought he did a good job down the stretch, particularly in that bowl game win that they had at the end of the year. But seeing him in the Zach Kittley offense on a full game basis will be fascinating. I'm curious to see how Houston responds after a game that was much, much tougher than I think certainly they expected, or certainly some of us expected. I think we all know UTSA would fight, but Houston was on the ropes there in the third quarter of that game. And so I'm curious to see how Houston bounces back from that. And this is a big game for them too, because they were up pretty quick. I think it was 14-0 last year in that game in NRG to start the year. And then things kind of fell apart for Houston after that. And of course, those programs went in a little bit different directions. Of course, Tech ended up making a change down the road. Houston, of course, didn't lose another game until they got to the conference championship against Cincinnati. But if Houston's going to be that team that people have pegged them as the New Year's Six favorite, so to speak, then they got to win this, and they've got to go up to Lubbock and get it done.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if that week one triple overtime win for Houston was almost a blessing in disguise. They got beat last year in week one to Texas Tech, as you mentioned. After being ahead, they kind of had to play role reversal against UTSA and come back from a 21-7 fourth quarter deficit. Do you think it's one of those things where that could be like a wake up call for Houston, and maybe that's kind of the floor performance we see from them for the rest of the year?
Very well could be. I think there are still some concerning things to me from Houston's standpoint. Obviously, they struggled a little bit to run the ball for stretches in that game. And if there was one thing that concerned me about this team coming into the year, it was the absence of Alton McCaskill. Losing him in the spring to that knee injury. It was such a dynamic player for them last year. And I think because of how much talent is across the roster, I think it was easy for people to overlook and say, well, they'll still be fine. But I think it is hard to replace a guy like that. So I would be interested to see how they grow in that backfield. But when it comes from a defensive standpoint, and I know Doug Belk talked about it the other day, hey, we've got to clean up some stuff in 2 minutes because we allowed Frank Harris to get down there in less than a minute to get that game-time field goal. So I think that is a blessing for sure, because you see, okay, we've got to clean up some of these things defensively. We've got to get better in the run game, and we've just got to make fewer mistakes overall. And I think those are all pretty typical game one things that they can build off of.
I'm excited for this game because my idea of heaven at the current moment is Zach Kittley's offense versus Doug Belk's defense.
100%. No, that when this game, when I looked at it on the schedule and Tech made the change and the coaching staff and they hired Kittley, that was one of the first things I thought is, hey, Texas Tech put up 601 yards last week, and I know obviously it was against Murray State, but seeing them go all out, air it out, and against this Belk defense. And of course, Belk is somebody who's gotten a lot of attention this offseason as a potential head coaching candidate down the road. That is going to be a fascinating matchup. The Houston's front, we saw what it can do. You saw Derek Parrish make that big play in that comeback to put some pressure and force the interception. But I'm fascinated to see that strength versus strength matchup in this game.
Moving to Austin, ESPN Game Day is in town. Fox News College Noon, whatever they call that thing, is in town. Longhorn Network's got a live show, so we got 3 live shows going for this game with the 21-point spread. Is there a formula for Texas to win this game? Should we define winning as different than just like the scoreboard? Is there another way that Texas can kind of impress and come out of this feeling pretty good even if they don't win?
Yeah, just don't get embarrassed.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. Don't get beat like you're an FCS or a G5 team. And not to say that Alabama doesn't do that to some Power 5 teams. I mean, I've seen it. Heck, I remember like in 2014, the year after Johnny Manziel left A&M, Alabama beat Texas A&M 59-0. They can do that to you if you're not careful. Things can snowball, but just be competitive. I think that's the first thing, because let's be honest, I don't think any of us are expecting Texas to win that game. I think it would be a surprise to all of us if they did. And they've got 10 more games after the season. So this game, to me, it's all the buildup has been there, and everybody's going to be focusing on it. And to some people, maybe ascribe some larger narrative to Texas based on this. But to me, the Texas and what defines the Longhorns this season is going to be what happens after this game. What happens the following week at UTSA? What happens the week after that when they go to Lubbock to play Texas Tech? How do they fare in conference play? Is there a hangover effect from this game? Would I give them a puncher's chance to win? I don't expect it. But to me, there's enough talent that, hey, if things go right and Alabama gets a little sloppy, you never know. That's the one thing is that Texas has recruited at a really high level. And so you can't rule it out because of that. And they're at home. It's going to be a big crowd. You know, you just never know how these things can go. But yeah, of course, I'm not expecting it. And I think as long as they're not down 40-0 at halftime or something like that, then if Texas can do some positive things and be in the game for a little while, then maybe they have something to build on moving forward.
Yeah, I looked it up, and Alabama's last 5 losses, they've lost the turnover battle. But I still think if you told me Texas won the turnover margin by 2, I'd still pick Alabama. I think we'd have to get into Texas getting 3, 4, 5 more turnovers to pick Alabama. I'm with you. I think it's just keep it close. Like earlier I was saying off camera, like if people are still watching this game in the fourth quarter, that's a win for Texas. If people have turned the channel at halftime, I think we know what we need to know about the scoreboard. But what I wanted to ask you before we move on to Baylor BYU is, does the result on Saturday determine how they play the next 10 games? I think we've seen Texas not get over defeats very well. Like, do they need to play well on Saturday to keep the belief to play the next 10 games? Or if this team gets blown out Saturday, are they fragile enough to just that rolls into just like, oh, here we go again type season?
Yeah, I think it does matter in that way. And I think when talking to some of the players on Monday, I think one of them alluded to that. I want to say it was the Marvin Overshone that said that their goal, as Sark said on Monday, was to play in the Big 12 championship in Arlington. And some of that is going to be defined by how they respond to adversity when things get tough. Things are going to get hard on Saturday. This is the best team in college football. And I think he said, however we respond to that is going to tell how our season goes from here. I thought that was pretty wise. Obviously, he's a veteran guy. He's been around this program a long time, but I think that's true. I think how you fight and how you battle some of the stuff you're going to deal with in this game is going to define this team to a degree for the rest of the year and tell us how they're going to fight against Oklahoma, or if it gets tough against Iowa State or Baylor, how they're going to answer in those moments may be foreshadowed by what we see on the field on Saturday.
Speaking of Baylor, the Bears head to BYU on Saturday night. Kickoff's not until 9:15, so it's going to be a gambler's paradise there. The Bears are 3.5-point underdogs on the road in Provo to future Big 12 rival opponent. Kind of what are your thoughts on Baylor this year? Like, where do you stand in terms of expectations? Is this a team you think can compete for another conference title? Is this a team that you think just going to kind of get to 7-8 wins? You know, like where do you see Baylor in year 3 under Dave Aranda?
I think this game is going to tell us that.
Yeah.
I think this is the litmus test game to reveal to us, is this team legitimately built to make that run back to the conference title, or is this an 8 or 9 win team that's going to have some growing pains? I picked them in the preseason to be the Big 12 champion because of what they brought back on the line of scrimmage. Bringing back that many offensive linemen who played really, really well last year, bringing back your entire 2 deep on the defensive line and adding a guy like Jackson Player, to me, that starting there, bringing all that back in the trenches is so huge. And yes, they've got a lot to replace in the back end of the defense. They've got to replace Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard, new receivers. You know, Shapen's got to go through the full thing as a starter. No Abram Smith anymore. You've got to figure out, you know, how the rushing rotation is going to go. All those questions have to be answered, and they're not necessarily going to come this weekend. But the fact that you start with that part, to me, buys you time to figure the rest out. Now, BYU's going to be ready for this game because BYU went to Waco and they got handled pretty well last year. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of motivation, intensity from the Cougar standpoint for this one. But to me, this will be very informative for us as to where Baylor is headed the rest of the year.
All righty, sir. I appreciate the knowledge as always. Thanks for taking the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Y'all take care.
You too. That was Sam Kahn, senior writer at The Athletic, one of my favorite people in this business, and read him whenever possible.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's definitely one of my favorite people that I've met in the business so far. And I haven't been in the business very long, but like he's up there. He's such a nice, personable guy. He'll always come up to you and talk to you, and yeah, he's great.
If anybody ever says anything bad about Sam Kahn,
we're coming for you.
well, they're telling on themselves. Like it's like, oh, well, if you don't like Sam, that means Sam doesn't like you, and if Sam doesn't like you, there's something wrong with you.
Exactly.
One of the nicest guys in this industry will do anything and everything to help anybody, and that can be lost sometimes. This is a pretty competitive industry. We're all kind of competitors, right? Like Sam's a competitor of mine, right? But we're still really good friends, and I think that's an important thing in this industry to do. So appreciate Sam coming on, and now we're moving to the lightning round of games.
Boom. All right, let's go ahead and start off with a good one. We got Texas A&M taking on Appalachian. Do you say Appalachian or Appalachian?
I say Appalachian, but I don't know if that's correct.
I don't either, so we're just going to go with that. Appalachian State this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. You can watch the game on ESPN2. A&M favored by 18 points, which to me, I don't know, and just watching their performance last week against Sam Houston State, they put up 31 points on Sam Houston State. They had over 500 yards of offense and only put up 31 points. To me, I just didn't think the offense looked that impressive. Do you think they're going to be able to they're going to win by 18 points against a team that just came off of a really, really close loss to North Carolina?
I honestly do, and here's why. I think that defeat by Appalachian State was deflating. I think when you get that close to beating your kind of in-state big brother, right, and then you don't get it, that's going to be really hard for the locker room to bounce back from and just get back ready for another road game in a different state against a team that's really, really good. Conversely, I think how poorly they played to their standards in week one will propel A&M to play super well.
A lot better.
In week two. I think Haynes King knocked off some of the rust. I don't know if we see him make as many mistakes. That offensive line and running game have to be better. A guy like Evan Stewart's gotten a game under his belt at wide receiver, so he should be even better. Anaya Smith was excellent against Sam Houston. And that defense is going to get better every single week. They're so young. They're so talented that each week is kind of like a iron-on-iron sharpening session, And so, I think every week they play together, they get better and better. What I'm interested in this game is just watching Haynes King and his progression. He made a few throws last week that you just dropped your jaw in awe of because they were such good throws. And then he made a few throws that you dropped your jaw because it was like, how did you not see that guy? That was straight to a defender. What a bad throw. And so if he can eliminate the bad ones and get more towards 65, 70% completions, 0 interceptions, maybe just 1 interception, this A&M team's got as much talent as almost anybody in the nation, save, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. So as long as Haynes can drive the bus, I think A&M's going to do really well. I think this week they're going to have a really good game, and App State's going to kind of come back to earth a little bit.
Right. I don't think there's really – I think the story here is going to be that Texas A&M offense against Appalachian State's defense. I don't think A&M's defense really has any problem. Last week, Chase Bryce is their quarterback, Appalachian State's quarterback, put up over 361 yards. Not going to be possible against this Texas A&M pass rush for sure.
Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next game in the lightning round. UTEP taking on New Mexico State at the Sun Bowl. UTEP is favored by 14 points. The over-under for this game is 46. Now, I kind of talked to you about this game beforehand, and when I was looking at New Mexico State and who they've played, they're 0-2 as well. They got shut out by Minnesota last week. So is UTEP. Both coming in 0-2. Yet UTEP is favored by over 2 scores. Is that surprising to you at all?
No, because New Mexico State is arguably the worst FBS team in the nation. We'll talk about another one later with FIU playing Texas State, but New Mexico State's that bad. I actually am surprised it's not more. If UTEP was only 0-1, had that schedule not been changed and they didn't play against North Texas and they'd only played against Oklahoma so far, UTEP be a 17.5, 20-point favorite.
Right.
Hammer the Miners. This is a preview of Craven Bets right here. Hammer the Miners. 14 points isn't enough. I know they didn't play well against North Texas, but they never play well against North Texas. I know they got beat down by Oklahoma, but of course they did. Yep. Right? They're going to play a team that's more like them now. This is a future Conference USA opponent. This is their main rivalry. It's only about a 40-minute drive to Las Cruces. We made that drive when we were out there.
We did.
And so I think UTEP shows up to this game because they have to have it. New Mexico State's not playing for anything this year. This is Jerry Kill's year number 1. They're just trying to right the ship and get the program back in order. They're not trying to get to a bowl game. UTEP's trying to get to a bowl game.
Yep.
And they can't do that if they don't win this game, and they're not going to have the confidence to do it if they don't win this game in impressive fashion.
Right.
So I think this is a get-right game for UTEP. I think they play really well. I think the defense shows up. I think Gavin Harson has a big game through the air. I don't know if they hit the over and under because I don't know if New Mexico State scores enough for that, but I do think UTEP covers the 14 and wins by closer to 3 touchdowns.
Right. And we talked about this a little bit on our review, I guess, recap podcast, but nobody expected UTEP to go in there and just, beat OU or even stay close to them, but they held their own.
Yeah, they played well.
They held their own, and I think going into this game being 0-2, playing a fairly decent game, better than anybody else expected them to play against OU, coming back to the Sun Bowl, I think you've got all the momentum in the world coming into this game if you're UTEP.
Yeah, and you have all the pressure too.
Yep.
And so you just got to get that lead early in the first quarter, build a little confidence, get that anxiety out of the stands, where everybody just kind of, okay, we're fine. The sky isn't falling. We're not about to go 1-11 again. Everything's okay. And so I think this is an important game for UTEP and one that they're going to play really well. And Dana Dimel tends to do well in these kind of games. Back up against the wall, everybody counting them out. This is usually when UTEP does their best work.
Yes. And I also didn't mention it, but that game is going to be on Saturday, kickoff at 8 p.m., 7 p.m. their time, on ESPN Plus if you want to watch that game. Speaking of one of the worst FBS teams in the country, Texas State taking on really tough program FIU. That game's going to be this Saturday at 6 p.m. If you want to watch the game, it's going to be on ESPN Plus.
You can join Ish.
You could join Ish, the one viewer that's going to, because we're going to force him to watch it because we're not going to watch it. So.
That's his job on ROF.
That's literally his job on ROF is to be the Texas State keeper. Yeah. But Texas State, of course, going into this game favored by 13.5. The over-under is 61, which to me is definitely going to take the under on that one because I don't think FIU can put up nearly that many points to hit the.
Yeah, I think you could give them 2 games and the under would still hit between these two offenses. Texas State last week had -12 rushing yards. They gave up 4 sacks. Yeah. They had 4 turnovers, 10 penalties. Just a sloppy, ugly game. What's the locker room like this week?
Right.
How up are they? How much belief is there? I know it's the first home game of the year. Maybe you can just eliminate that Nevada game, turn the page, and start over from scratch. Lane Hatcher put up some numbers. They threw the ball a lot. I think 50-plus times they threw the ball. So Jake Spavital and that offense is going to go down swinging. I just can't count on them to not make enough mistakes. I think they win. I think they cover. They should. Because if they don't, right, if Texas State sneaks this one out, or, God forbid, Texas State loses this game, the wheels are falling off in San Marcos. So kind of like what we were talking about with UTEP. It feels like a back against the wall, if not now, never type game. So if Texas State's going to have a good performance this year, you'd imagine it's going to be this Saturday.
Right, because that FIU secondary is bad.
It's bad.
I mean, it's probably ranked 131 out of 131.
Yeah, they're really bad. Like we were talking about with New Mexico State. New Mexico State, FIU, Charlotte, those are some of the worst teams in the FBS.
Right, and I agree with you. I think if Lane Hatcher plays a mistake-free game, that this one should be an easy dub for Texas State. Moving on to some FBS, FCS.
Oh, we skipped UTSA Army.
We did skip UTSA Army. I didn't even make lower third for that one, but we'll go ahead and talk about that one. UTSA taking on Army this week, Saturday at 11 a.m. on CBSN. Gambling odds, UTSA favored by only 2. The over-under is 54.5. And I think that Army is definitely going to be one of the strangest opponents that UTSA faces all year.
Yeah, you can't prepare for Army. You just play Army.
You can't.
You know, like you're not going to have guys chopping at your legs and doing all the weird triple option stuff that Army does. So for UTSA, it's just gap discipline. It's more film work. You're going to do a lot more mental reps this week than physical reps on film and just kind of walking through plays and what Army wants to do. Army also 0-1 coming off a Coastal Carolina loss, but back home. It'll be interesting for me. Like UTSA on paper should win this game. Like you take RJ Carter at Army is excellent. Going to be an NFL draft pick, kind of one of the only Army NFL draft picks in recent memory. But you take away him, and UTSA is more talented, right? Frank Harris, that passing game is really good. Offensive line's okay. You did lose the right tackle in that game against Houston, and he's not going to be back for a while. They lost the left tackle in preseason camp, so they are without two offensive linemen. But I was super impressed with UTSA's defense last week.
Absolutely.
They played excellently. Like Sam mentioned, Houston struggled to run the ball. I don't know if that's so much Houston is missing Alton McCaskill or if UTSA is just better against the run than maybe we thought they were going to be.
Right.
For me, UTSA should win this game unless the Houston game beats them twice.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is you lose a triple overtime game like that against a team you weren't supposed to beat but is going to the Big 12. Like you had a chance to really put a marker down that UTSA football is here and it's here to stay, and it slipped through their fingers. They were up 21-7 going into the fourth quarter, kind of a freak interception that lets them get it in there. They get into overtime. Like there were so many chances for UTSA to win that game. They were 13-3 in one-score games going into that game, so they're used to winning close games. Hopefully their confidence isn't shooken, right? Because the only way I see them going and losing this game is, one, if that Army offense just confuses them and just torches them, because sometimes Army can do that.
Right.
Or it's that UTSA is still so sad or concerned or down by that loss to Houston that they just don't get up in the necessary way to beat Army.
Right. I'm always curious to know how just the regular team defensively prepares for a team like Army, because they don't pass the ball.
Yeah.
Like we looked up their stats. They had maybe 50 passing yards, and they were all short passes over the middle into the end zone or something like that. So for a team that looked really good in the secondary last week, how does UTSA kind of dial it down there and then put more towards that?
Yeah, you'll see Chapman in the box a lot. You're not going to play two high safeties because they basically were playing two high safeties, doubling Nathaniel Dell and daring Houston to beat them in any other way, which is why Clayton Tune ended up having so much success running the football late in the game, is there just wasn't anybody left to account for him.
Right.
Against Army, you're not going to be out on the practice field with your scout team offense running a lot of these plays because you don't want to get any of your guys hurt.
Exactly.
So you kind of set up dummies, you kind of set up gaps, and then you just walk through it. You kind of mentally rep your way through it. Coming off of a triple overtime game where you played a lot of snaps, that's probably the best thing anyway. But it's going to take a little while. I wouldn't be surprised if Army scored 7, 14, 21 early points, and UTSA is having to play catch-up as the defense kind of adjusts to it. So it's just one of those weird games when you play one of the Armed Forces teams, and you're going to figure out kind of your toughness level because they're going to show up and play.
Right.
That's one thing you do know about Army. UTSA is going to have to get over last week, dust themselves off, and overcome some adversity, something they didn't have to do a lot of last year.
It's also one of those games that you can't start preparing for until the week before, because you can't just change up that quick. It's just kind of, it's always interested me to see teams like that play Army, just because you got to really just adjust that defense so much. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on. We've got 4 FBS teams taking on 4 FCS teams this week. Starting off, we've got SMU, hosting Lamar. Lamar's in Houston, right? So
it is. Beaumont.
That's why I said Houston. I think I was thinking of that. But that game is on Saturday at 6 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN+. And, of course, there's no betting lines because it is FCS team.
SMU by 100.
I was going to say SMU by 100.
There may have not been a more impressive team last week than SMU.
No.
Like that I mean, we all knew the offense was going to be really explosive. Like we've seen Rhett Lashley call plays at SMU, and it was glorious then. It was glorious on Saturday against North Texas. What I was surprised about is how clean they played. You would have thought SMU played the Week 0 game, and this was North Texas's first game. Because SMU, wasn't turning the ball over a lot. They weren't getting a lot of penalties. They were playing well on special teams. Blocked a punt. I think blocked a field goal attempt.
Yes.
Almost had a return for a touchdown. So, they played really well in all three phases of football. For the Week 1, that's impressive. And for Week 1, your first time as a head coach with that many new faces and transfers, I was super impressed with SMU. Lamar, 28-14 loss to Abilene Christian. That 14 points was just kind of 2-3 freak plays, right? They didn't drive the football down. This one could get pretty bad. But for SMU, it's a chance to see a lot of the young guys, all the faces, get everybody to play. It's just one of those kind of games for the Mustangs.
It seemed like those couple of plays, too, that Lamar was able to string together last week were just big-time explosive plays, right? SMU's defense is able to accommodate that pretty well. So I don't see Lamar's game plan being that, relying on those explosive plays. Like, they're going to have to try and just probably run the ball a lot, just try and get it downfield as slowly as possible.
Right.
Like, you're not going to be able to throw the ball. Right. You're not going to be able to have those explosive plays like last week.
Well, I think Lamar, you're just hoping that Rhett Lashley doesn't want to put up 80.
Yeah.
Because this one's as ugly as SMU wants it to be.
Right. So.
All
right, let's move on to another FBS FCS matchup in North Texas hosting Texas Southern. Let's just hope that North Texas, this is a redemption game for North Texas. Yeah, like this is one where you say, hey, sorry about last week. We're going to drop 50 on you. Sorry, Texas Southern. You're just kind of like the back end of the madness that we had to suffer through last week. This is a get-right game for North Texas.
Yeah, Austin may contend for Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week again because Stephen F. Prairie View A&M scored 40 points on Texas Southern without completing a pass.
A single pass.
So that Texas Southern defense, really, really bad. Like you said, a get-right game for North Texas. They should, a lot like SMU, right, against Lamar, win this game as much as, by as many points as, they want to. The one thing to watch here is, and we were talking about it pre-show with The Office, the Texas Southern quarterback's really good. Andrew Bodie's really, really good. An excellent SWAC player. Was awesome. Corpus Christi set records down there. He can score points. He can make plays. That North Texas defense is probably going to give up some yards, going to give up some points just because he's that good. That's going to be kind of the only thing to really watch early because North Texas should just ground Texas Southern into oblivion.
Yes.
Because if Prairie View can score 40 points just running the ball, North Texas should be able to score 60 points running the ball. Because, I'll make fun of the Mean Green all day, but they can run the football.
They can run the football.
Especially between the tackles. They can play some grown man, we're going to line up and hit you in the mouth, run the football. Against SMU, that doesn't work. Against Texas Southern, it will. So, Mean Green by a lot.
Yes. I didn't mention it, but that game is on Saturday at 6:30 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN3. Let's move on to another get-right game, hopefully. Rice taking on McNeese at home. That game's on Saturday, also at 6:30 p.m., and you can watch that one on ESPN3 as well. And like I mentioned, another get-right game for Rice because this probably is going to be the only non-conference game that they have a chance of winning.
Yeah, they play Louisiana and Houston after this, started with USC. We talked about the Wiley Green injury earlier, so that means this is a big game for TJ McMahon, and just to build some confidence. Don't throw interceptions, throw a couple touchdowns, leave feeling good about yourself. You had a rough showing in week 1 against USC in relief duty. Let's build some confidence, give them some easy throws, let the running game do a lot of the work. So you kind of come out of this game feeling okay and with a healthy quarterback. You can't risk losing another one, right? And so I think for Rice, this is just let your front seven dominate defensively, let your offensive line and Ari Broussard and that running game cook on offense, and then kind of manufacture some ways for the passing game to get some confidence, to complete 60-65% of the passes. Doesn't even matter for how many yards, but safe, easy passes, safe, easy completions that don't put them in a lot of risk, because as we've seen, he's capable of throwing one or two really bad footballs a game.
Right. And last up on our slate of games this week, we've got TCU hosting Tarleton. That game is this Saturday at 7 p.m. You can also watch this game on ESPN Plus. And like we said about the last two, this is just a kind of another like, hey, let's just kind of get back on the right track. Let's give Max Duggan a couple more reps. Probably going to be a TCU blowout.
Yeah, I think this is good for Max Duggan. He probably didn't get as many snaps with the ones the last 2 or 3 weeks of fall camp as Chandler Morris, so this kind of gives them some real life practice, because that's all this is a glorified scrimmage.
True.
And so, I think for TCU, you still got to remember TCU, it's a new coaching staff. So any opportunity to go out there and get some stuff on film, play different opponents that don't know what you like to do, you don't know what they like to do. There's off-script stuff. There's variables that you can't account for like you can in practice. I think it's still valuable for the Horned Frogs. If Sonny Dykes was in his third year, probably not as valuable. But when you're in your first year, you're still trying to figure out who can do what, who can't do what the young guys are. They should be able to get pretty much their whole roster on the field. That's still an invaluable thing for a new coach and a new coaching staff.
Yep. Well, that completes our Week 2 game. Or slates, Week 2 slate of game. I can't even talk to my now. But
you were up late last night calling some volleyball.
I was calling the North Texas Southern game.
Yeah.
So I got to see North Texas sweep Texas Southern in volleyball, and maybe they can kind of do the same.
You know what's nice about Dave Campbell's Texas football is if you want to feel like you're kind of lazy,
yeah,
you come work up here, because everybody in the world, everybody up here's got like 8 different gigs. Y'all are doing work during the day. Y'all are on TV late at night. You're calling, volleyball games. Pickle and Tepper doing Friday night Bally stuff. And Ish has like 6 jobs up here. He does like 13 different things, and I'm just like, man, Rice is pretty good.
Man, did you see Wiley Green go down that week?
I complain about 47 college football programs. Tepper's like, we have 1,400 high schools. Like, leave me alone.
Oh Lord,
yeah.
no, you do. You're
good.
fine.
It's good. No, it's good. It's good for your soul to be brought down to earth. I can get a little too confident, so it's good sometimes being around here with all you superstars. That will be it for the Republic of Football. I hope you were able to handle my hosting. Ish is much better at this. Speaking of things Ish does better than me, hosting internet shows is one of them. We are a live internet show every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Please like, subscribe, rate us as 5 stars on all your podcast platforms. You can catch us on YouTube, all those kind of things. We're pretty much everywhere.
Yeah,
I don't know where we're not.
We are. We're even on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Like, you can literally watch us live on Twitter.
It'd be easier to list where we're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Than where we are. So it's 2022. You know how to find us. You know how to rate things. You know how to subscribe. If it's 4-star or under, we don't want it. So that'll be it for us.
do not give us a 4-star. Like, if you don't, just do 5.
4-star or no star. 5-star or no star. If you missed it yesterday, Corey Hogue and I put out a small college football podcast we're going to do every Tuesday of the other 35 teams in the state that play college football. Sam Houston, Incarnate Word, Stephen F., Mary Hardin Baylor, Trinity, all of those schools. We covered all of that. We're excited to bring that to you on Sunday. We'll be back with a recap episode, Mallory, Ish, and I. Well, maybe if Texas State loses, it'll just be me and you again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
But 2 or 3 of us will be back on the Sunday episode to recap all the action from Week 2.
Oh, also, too, I wanted to say, if you do want to go listen to that the Small College podcast, it's still under the Republic of Football. Yep. We're keeping it under the same name. It's just kind of an extension of, obviously, our FBS Talk podcast, but you can still find it in the same spot.
We're in a download competition. This is one of those things.
Oh, yeah,
like, I don't
right.
know if Pickle and Tepper even know. This is like one of those things. Like, TFT doesn't even know.
They don't even care.
We have beef,
we're like
but we have beef, right? We're in a download competition, or at least I am. With TFT. So now that we have 3 shows compared to their 5, it's a little bit closer playing field.
Download.
So, mash those download buttons, tell all your friends, all that kind of stuff. Grab your mom's phone and just download it onto hers, or whatever you need to do. We'll take cheating.
We'll give you an RF shirt.
Yeah, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So appreciate you listening. Thanks for all that y'all have done over this last month for us. We've had really good numbers, and so we're really excited about that. It's one of our favorite parts of the week, so we enjoyed doing it. That will be it for us at Republic of Football. After Week 2, we will talk to you again on Sunday. As a reminder, we have had 12 of the eventual 13 FBS coaches
you
in the
did it.
state. Jimbo Fisher, give us a call.
Go Rutgers.